Hello and welcome to episode 7. You are about to enter a realm not just of sight and sound, but of shadowed memories and lingering spirits. Tonight's tale takes us to the lonely roads of Ireland, where three old friends reunite in search of warmth, laughter, and the comfort of the familiar. Their destination? A quiet hidden pub, a place that seems to exist outside of time, where the only companions are flickering shadows and the deep silence of the winter night. Sit back and prepare yourself for The Phantom Hitchhiker. Back in the late 1980s, though I can't remember the exact year, I took a trip to Cork, Ireland to meet up with some old friends. Sarah and Nicole were school friends of mine who had moved to Ireland for work, and although I hadn't seen them much since, we always picked up right where we left off, as if no time had passed. It was winter, bitterly cold, and I remember bundling up in a heavy coat to ward off the biting chill. We spent most of our time together in cosy old pubs, drinking Guinness, laughing and reliving our school days. One pub, in particular, became our favourite. It was tucked away in the middle of nowhere, off the beaten track. Getting there was a hassle. It was about a 20-minute drive from Nicole's house, but we loved it because it was so secluded. The atmosphere was warm, the kind of place that made you feel like you had stumbled upon a hidden treasure. Nicole, always the responsible one, didn't drink much and was more than happy to drive. She was the type who didn't need alcohol to have a good time. Sarah, on the other hand, was happy to knock back a few. So one night, we decided to head back to this pub and make a night of it. The roads were long and winding, sandwiched between towering trees that seemed to loom over us, casting eerie shadows in the car's headlights. It was remote and quiet. You'd be lucky to pass another car. As we drove, the pub came into view, glowing warmly in the distance, a beacon in the dark. It felt like our secret, hidden away from the world. The Slaughtered Lamb pub from An American Werewolf in London came to mind, though this place lacked the 5-pointed star on the wall. We arrived, freezing and rubbing our hands together as we stepped inside to be greeted by a roaring fire. We settled in, intending to stay until closing. When the pub finally shut its doors for the night, we bundled back up and headed out into the freezing pitch-black night. There were no streetlights, just the faint glow of the moon above. The car was ice cold as we began the drive back to Nicole's place. And that's when things started to get strange. We were driving down one of those long and winding roads, trees stretching endlessly on either side, when something caught our eye. Something white in the distance. She looked to be in her early 20s, standing by the side of the road. What struck us immediately was that she wasn't dressed for the weather. No coat, no warm clothes, just a cream-coloured boho dress and long brown hair. She was standing there as if waiting for us to stop. It was strange, but we couldn't just leave her there in the freezing cold. We pulled over, the car idling a few feet ahead of her. She walked towards us and without hesitation got into the back seat, right next to me. We greeted her, asked if she was okay, but she barely responded, just said she needed to get to the pub we'd just left. Her voice was quiet, with a thick Irish accent. She stared blankly ahead, her expression vacant, but something about her was just odd. We asked what she was doing out there in the cold, and all she said was, "I just need to get to the pub." Her demeanour was strange, distant, almost unreachable. The only other thing she said was, "I love it here. It's so beautiful." We agreed but told her it wasn't safe to be wandering around at night. When we arrived back at the pub, she gave us a big smile and didn't say a word. She got out of the car, leaving the door wide open behind her. We watched her walk towards the pub, but something didn't sit right with us. "What the hell just happened?" asked Sarah and Nicole. Nicole, looking uneasy, suggested we watch to make sure she got inside safely. But as we peered through the fogged up windows, we realised we couldn't see her anywhere. We got out of the car, scanning the area, but she was gone. The pub was locked up, the lights off, except for a faint glow inside. Confused, we knocked on the heavy wooden door, and the landlord, a large man, answered. We explained what had happened, and we had just given a girl a ride here, but hadn't seen her go inside. The landlord looked puzzled. He paused for a moment, then said, "You better come in." We followed him inside, expecting to see the girl sitting by the fire, warming herself, but instead, he walked us over to the bar, picked up a framed photo, and turned it towards us. "Was this the girl?" he asked. It was her. The girl we'd just given a ride. She was wearing the same cream-coloured dress, her hair the same. We nodded, shocked. "Yes, that's her," we said. The landlord took a deep breath and explained that she used to work in the pub. She was a lovely girl, he said, but one winter night, about 3 years ago, she'd been in a terrible accident on one of those winding roads and died at the scene. We stood there stunned. I stammered, But we just had her in our car." The landlord, clearly used to this, nodded solemnly. "You're not the first," he said. "Many people have picked her up, brought her here. She never makes it inside. She just disappears." We left the pub in silence, overwhelmed by what had just happened. We drove back to Nicole's house, unable to shake the eerie encounter. To this day, it's an experience none of us will ever forget. Thank you to Jenny from Leicester for sending in that story. And yeah, what a great tale that was. I mean, just seeing a girl stood on the side of the road in the, late at night in a white dress is pretty freaky anyway, isn't it? I mean, whether or not it's a genuine hitchhiker or anything, just seeing someone stood there like that would make me, jump out my skin. But the fact, I find it quite fascinating how she sort of feels this need to continue the journey she was originally on before she died. She still wants to make it to the pub, to do her shift. It's weird how, she's continuing like it's held in time. When she died, that moment when she crossed over to the other side, it's just strange how it's still important to her to want to do that. That's one of the mysteries of the sort of spirit world I can't get my head around. Now for story number 2, sent in from Ellie at Reddit. This story is called Dark Vibes. I was visiting my ex, who lived in a super old house. It had been a hotel, brothel, store and a funeral home in its former life. Currently, it's a home and would look so beautiful if you could only see the wonderful architecture and grand wallpaper as it used to be. Instead, the house looks as if it has been forgotten for some time. Dust and cobwebs are visible on every surface, but especially on the deep mahogany carved trim that encircled every room and sometimes protruded into elaborate carvings of guardian protectors. It was unnerving to be in this home at any time. The hair on the back of your neck would stand every time you switched rooms, as if you had walked in on something that couldn't be seen. That feeling is something you can get used to though. It's a feeling that fades quickly and grows comfortable after a while. This was a feeling that you didn't mind because it didn't trigger any emotion. It was just more of a reminder that some people are unseen. At night, the house was a different story. Not often, but some nights the house after the sunset felt different. It filled with tension. You could feel the hair on your neck stand, but the energy of someone being there is much different. This feeling causes goosebumps. It's uncomfortable, tension-filled and chilling. This feeling doesn't fade, and sometimes they return just from the mentions of stories I encountered. Not lasting as long as before, but definitely there. This night, I went over because my boyfriend's parents and siblings had gone out of town and needed us to dog sit. We hung around the house and watched TV. That night we decided we would travel to the upstairs back hall just to scare ourselves. The house felt quieter than normal that day. We were worried we might not see anything in the back hall. Like all of the last spirits were on vacation. That night it changed. Everyone knows this house is haunted. This is no doubt, but as you climb the stairs to the second story, you are met with another level of paranormal. Almost constantly, you hear things that don't make sense. You feel that negative tension in the air, and you catch things out of the corner of your eye that you can't find reasoning for. To add a little extra spice, the upstairs had lost all of its electricity several years prior. Instead, they had extension cords running to the 3 main bedrooms. The upstairs is split into 2 parts. One of the parts is at the top of the staircase. It opens to 3 main bedrooms, each with a giant door made of solid wood, and sharing the same grand crown moulding as the downstairs. Immediately to the left of the staircase was another identical door. This door leads to a hallway. The hallway was a few rooms and a bathroom. Room numbers still grace the front of each door to let hotel guests know which room would be accommodating them for the evening. We got excited to go exploring and maybe dig up some trouble. As we went up the stairs, things felt different. Even in the dark, nothing was happening. Just like earlier in the day, the house was quiet. It just felt like we were in an old house. No goosebumps, no presence of another, no noise. As we turned the handle and opened the door to the back hallway, it changed immediately. Suddenly, all around us was a presence of darkness and a feeling of terror. We immediately had the same thought. No. We closed the door and almost immediately the air cleared of all the terrible feeling it had presented just moments earlier. Since the house felt so calm, we decided to spend some time in my boyfriend's bedroom upstairs. As we lay there watching a movie, the lights flickered. Not uncommon because of the extension cord fire hazard that ran from the living room and up the stairs. The flicker brought with it that horrible presence we had felt opening the back hallway door, rushing back to us. As we glanced at each other in terror, the lights flickered one more and a loud crash came from outside the door, and repetitive beats like a toddler running pounded loudly in the hallway directly outside of the room. Only 5 or 6 steps, but incredibly loud. As soon as the pounding footfalls stopped, the air changed to normal again. We sat catching our breath together for what seemed like forever. Neither of us saying a word, and when we did speak, we decided we should leave for the night. The dog would be fine until morning. Upon opening the door to his bedroom to get out of the house, we heard a crunch. Lifting his shoe, we noticed that my ex had just stepped in broken glass. Upon further inspection, we realised it wasn't just broken glass, it was broken Christmas bulbs. These are special ornaments his mum puts up every year and keeps in special ornament totes with locking lids to prevent breakage. Those totes are behind a closed door, down a hallway, and inside a room that also had a closed door away from where they now lay, at our feet. Thank you to Ellie from Reddit for sending in that story. I find it very strange how some buildings can kind of have their own sort of ghost. I mean, like the building itself is the ghost. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't have to necessarily be a ghost in there using the building, but it almost seems like sometimes the property has its own spirit, which is odd. I mean, some stories lend itself to this reasoning, do you know what I mean? And I just find it's one of them things I kind of want to look into a bit more. For example, let's take the Amityville house. Now, we all know the story of Amityville, right? Well, most people who are into this kind of thing will. But it's for me, it's questionable. You know, is the house full of evil spirits, or is the house itself an evil spirit? Does that make sense? I mean, yeah, it's something I need to look into. It sort of crossed my mind recently when I was just thinking about it, and I was like, I guess it doesn't always have to be some kind of, figure or previous evil figure. The actual house itself could be the object. Anyway, I'm Andy Crofts. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. I will see you all next week for episode number 8. And once again, I will see you in the Terror Cellar. Don't have nightmares. Bye-bye.